A Plague Tale Requiem is a betrayal.
Betrayal! What? Betrayal! Betrayed me! This game sucks!
The first one was a pretty solid independent title, maybe double A at best. It reminded me of the days when the middle market in gaming wasn't dead, when you had smaller releases made by studios that were still pretty competent. All the same, I was betrayed when the game took the route of modern Western media and became woke after the first release. This game, and Ryan Johnson's Glass Onion, stands as a prime example of why I dislike the current far-left entertainment. Also, before you strawman me, yes, I was there when the far-right were doing witch hunts on everything. Jack Thompson feels like yesterday. What makes the entire farce more painful is that the game genuinely has good elements, mostly down to the superficial aspects, like visuals, but the core gameplay is nothing to slouch at. It feels like how a sequel should feel. It's the perfect evolution of the systems. The game elaborates on old mechanics by mixing them with new ones. So instead of simply lighting a flame to scare rats, you would also throw tar to make it stronger, to completely clear a path without having the need for finicking around like in the original game. At the same time, you also have to deal with soldiers more than in the other game, and it becomes this interesting balance of different systems coexisting next to one another. On top of that, there's a new upgrade system that unlocks depending on your playstyle. It's not ideal, but it at least tries. Most of the time you end up locking yourself into a form of play without being able to experiment. Otherwise, everything feels better. The animations being more fluid, but also the level design. It's less Splinter Cell 1 and more Splinter Cell Chaos Theory. There's only one exit to a level, but many a way to get there. It's a personal favorite of mine as a way to do level design. I also wanted to congratulate the voice acting, French and English. That's about where my praise ends. There's a couple of minor flaws in the gameplay, like being swarmed to death by barely enough rats to cover you. However, everything else that is a bother has something to do with the political viewpoint and how it affects the story. That so-called gameplay, for example, disappears after chapter 7 or so, being replaced by cinematic moments, but we all know these are not cinematic, they're just walking segments. A lot of elements get introduced and then tossed to the side. I didn't mention Hugo as a companion because he seldom serves a purpose. The rat mechanic is much better than the first title, but we're stuck walking for a long time, sometimes entire chapters. Scorn is blushing in a corner, wondering if it has a date. When it's not that, we have horrible boss encounters where Amicia is stuck fighting waves of opponents for story reasons, but the game being a good stealth game, you suck at combat. You need to be terrible at combat in a stealth game, or a horror game for that matter, because, and look at Dishonored, when you're too good at combat, why would you even hide in the first place? Everything feels fluid, but Amicia is still slow and takes a moment to prepare her gear, so don't think you're doing Doom Eternal levels of weapon swapping. She's clearly supposed to be an underpowered teenage girl, but the story now has her swearing death and revenge at every corner, completely ignoring the dynamic of how this setting should work. It's this pervasive idea that women can just fight on par with men, but even the best women can barely scrape a victory against the lower caliber of men. Finally, this leads us to the story. It is enjoyable at first, but becomes eventually quite awful. This is a good case to make for extreme left-minded ideas permeating through writing. There's no better example than Chapter 4, in which Amicia completely loses her goddamn mind and spends the rest of the game hysterical. She refuses to believe experts like her mother and a member of the Order because she thinks it's a better idea to follow her dream her brother had. Yes, it's 14th century science, but it's presented as factual and efficient. It's also about devil rats, so the argument doesn't work. It's shown that the research on devil rats is legitimate. Despite the fact that it's pretty well explained that the bearer of the mark dies past a certain point that has been reached, she refuses to accept the truth. Despite the fact that each new episode Hugo has causes the deaths of thousands, she refuses to comply. All of that being in vain because Hugo dies no matter what. There's no reason for her to refuse the proposed plan outside of the fact that there needs to be an adventure. I hate when writers push themselves into a corner they didn't need to be. Why not say the Order is evil, or better yet, have the road to reach them be the adventure? Or an even better idea, reach them immediately but have Amicia look for an alternative and have the adventure be a metaphor for the acceptance of death. A bit like Majora's Mask. No, instead, it's a metaphor for how all white men are evil and how you shouldn't have kids. Later on, when Amicia finds the truth, it is done so through the knowledge of the people she mocked and acts like she knew all along. The game never really acknowledges her failures as a person. The game is the definition of the path to hell is paved with good intentions. My Feelings edition. We literally reach hell because of her. At the end of the game, Hugo reaches the final stage of the macula, the evil that resides within him. The macula's cry is an event that is strong enough to destroy the city of Marseille. You find Hugo encased in an HR Giger cocoon. The structure pulsates like a heartbeat, unleashing tidal waves of wrath in each beat. Inside the structure, time and space doesn't make sense. Statues of death cry rivers of vermin who form into massive golems, and at the center of it all rests Hugo, who has become a brethren moon from dead space. After all of this, Amicia still doesn't want to sacrifice him because of her motto, save one to save all. Everyone's dead! Let's not beat around the bush. The issues in writing stem from politics. Writing is hard, but this seems too amateur of a mistake, and the studio did better in the past. When you identify the politics of contemporary media, you recognize what certain writing quirks mean. Let's break it down. The representative of the Order is the old white man, who is of course coded as a villain, and is unlikable past the point of caricature. He of course dies, and Amicia's mother has a conversation with her. She tells her that it's hard for her to understand the bond between her and her brother, and she angrily states that indeed her mother can't understand. Like in the previous game, all the men proceed to die, and the crux of the entire adventure is that we should listen to our feelings and go risk humanity's chances with a shot in the dark. The scene in which Amicia tells her mother that she can't understand is reminiscent of the end of WandaVision, when she's told that people will never understand her sacrifice. The problem with that scene is that she brainwashed an entire town and kept them against their will in an artificial reality. Some of them wanted to die, and their children were left unattended. Don't think too hard about babies being left alone in rooms for weeks. She did the right thing by letting them go, but that was the obvious thing to do. She's framed as having suffered more than anyone else, while all she had to do was let go of her imaginary kids. As for her husband Vision, a copy of him lives somewhere, but she doesn't care. Similarly, Amicia thinks her suffering greater than her mother, despite the fact that she's a noble woman who lost her status, her estate, saw her husband die, lived through an inquisition, got tortured, and now her son is dying, and her daughter is losing her mind. She has to live through the prospect of outliving her youngest kid, but don't worry, she dies before that. She's not going with the narrative, so who cares about what she thinks? It's obvious that this is the point of view of university students who have not been exposed to life. The point of view of their main character is clearly wrong, but she's treated as right. It evokes the mindset of whiny students who have lived no hardship. Even if they do experience hardship, they refuse to take lessons from it. It's okay to have a character in the wrong. Think Dr. House or Travis Touchdown. However, these characters are not supposed to be sympathized with. The narrative shows the consequences of their wrongdoing. Here, it is not shown, and women are once again used as a shield to convey horrible ideas. The few women who are traditional die or are treated as crazy and then die. The woman who wants to have a kid is clearly treated as wrong for a desire to have children. Again, the Western modern narrative that you should not have children to save the environment or whatever. The story goes on without admitting Amicia is wrong. It doesn't help that she's technically responsible for a lot of what's wrong in the story. You discover that the vague dream Hugo had was actually set up by the macula to lure him. If she had not insisted, he would have no way on following up on that. There's a point where even Hugo doesn't care about learning the truth, understandably so. He's exposed to horrible abject evil, not just human, but evil from beyond the veil of reality. Despite all of this, Amicia's desire to help him is more important, and she cares more about him than he to himself. It reaches a point, obviously, that's just awful. If she had given up, the cult of the child would have not found Hugo, killed Arno and her mother, and basically start the end of days. Most would have carried on. Even their enemies would be better off. They seem to be doing well on their paradise island. There's an interesting idea in the final fight that the fact that Amicia can't let go holds her from reaching the final boss fight. You have to let go of her ideas and avoid following the statues that were actually used by evil to lure you into the right direction. I like trying to fix things and not just complain. A story about someone not being able to let go and having gameplay correlate to that is great, but the narrative is confused. It can never show the heroine as being wrong, because of course only white men can be wrong. The overall package is pretty nice. Despite the optimization issues, it's still worth a try. Or would have been. I changed part of the script because of how baffling the latter half of the game and the ending was. You could say it's woke, but you could also say it's just French. I really changed around with this game. I went from recommending it as a buy on the deep sale, to playing it on Game Pass or Epic, to just ignoring it. I would not buy this. I got it through Game Pass. Get it there or wait for a deep discount on Steam or for it to drop on Epic. When it's on Epic, do like with most Epic games. Order it, but don't play it. Jokes aside, it's a worthwhile product. It's fun and much better than the first game, but I can't give money to something that is so misguided. It's a bit like Dishonored 2. Entertaining, but I want Get Woke Go Broke to be a thing. The latter game was one of the rare examples of it actually working. I covered that in my Arcane video. This is an adventure that is amazing to go through, but the constant hysteria and screaming just gets to you. I like horror games, so you know that I don't mind feeling bad. It's possible to be entertained through negative emotions, but being told that I'm trash because I'm a man is dumb and misanthropic. I believe women to be capable of great things, but according to this game, if a woman actually embraces her motherly instinct, she's insane. It offers nothing to anyone. It's miserable for the sake of miserable, and it says much of the mindset of those who made this. I grew to believe that humans can be one of the greatest forces in the universe. That's of course if we work properly and believe in ourselves. I'm tired of this self-hate of the people who do nothing to make more of themselves. There's so much better to play, so why waste my time on this? In the end, A Plague Tale Requiem just ended up being another modern Western subversion of storytelling. Don't delude yourself into thinking it's great or without issues. This needs to be called out, then promptly ignored, or we'll never have better in life.